Welcome to our deep dive into mental health in schools.
Yeah, a topic that seems to be finally getting the attention it deserves.
For sure. And, you sent over a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
Hopefully a good overview of the current landscape.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got academic studies reports from, big organizations like NAMI and the WHO, and even a look at some programs that are actually out there trying to make a difference.
Right. Tackling this head on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today, I guess our mission is to really understand, how big of a problem this is.
Yeah. How widespread is this?
Explore what support looks like in schools right now.
Because it's clearly not enough.
Yeah, and then see what the potential is for, actually making things better.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Sounds like a plan.
So to kick things off, you sent over some statistics that were honestly pretty eye-opening.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like NAMI reports that 1 in 6 U.S. youth
Wow.
experience a mental health disorder every single year.
Every year.
Yeah, and we're talking 6 to 17-year-olds.
That's a huge chunk of the population.
It is. And the WHO says globally, it's 1 in 7 kids and teens.
So similar numbers worldwide.
Yeah, age 10 to 19 this time.
It's a global issue for sure.
It really is. It's a lot of young people.
It is. And what's really fascinating is that NAMI also points out that half of all mental health conditions actually begin by age 14.
Wow.
So adolescence is just such a pivotal time, right?
I mean, think about all the changes happening then.
Exactly. Rapid brain development,
Hormonal
shifts,
definitely.
increasing social pressures.
You're figuring out who you are.
Yeah, exactly. It's really no surprise that this period is so crucial when it comes to mental health.
It makes you realize how important it is to understand what's actually happening in schools, right?
Absolutely. We need to see it from their perspective.
And you included this study called Mental Health in Kenyan Schools.
Oh, yeah. Powerful one.
And reading those teachers' accounts was really something.
Those were some incredibly vivid descriptions of the challenges they're facing every day.
Yeah, and it really struck me that we talk about mental health so much in terms of, diagnoses.
Yeah, clinical terms.
Right, but these teachers were witnessing a much broader spectrum of issues.
Things that impact a student's well-being, even if they don't fit neatly into a category.
Exactly.
It's about the whole picture.
Like one teacher mentioned a secondary student who was struggling with dyslexia.
Right, a learning difficulty that can really impact a child's self-esteem.
And even though there was a diagnosis in place, there was still no support system to actually help them learn effectively.
It's heartbreaking how often that happens.
It makes you think about how many students are slipping through the cracks, even when their challenges are identified.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just learning difficulties either.
Right. There were a lot of examples of what we call internalizing problems.
Things that aren't always visible from the outside.
Like withdrawal anxiety, even suicide attempts.
One teacher even described bedwetting in older students as a sign of extreme distress.
That's powerful.
These aren't the issues that always make headlines.
Right, they fly under the radar.
But they can be incredibly debilitating for young people.
For sure. And then there were the externalizing problems, the ones that are more outwardly visible.
The behaviors that can be disruptive or even aggressive.
Yeah, like hyperactivity, defiance, aggression.
One teacher talked about a student who was constantly creating these elaborate lies.
It sounds almost like a coping mechanism.
Exactly, and it was clearly a sign of deeper emotional turmoil.
You can see how overwhelmed these teachers are.
It's clear they're on the front lines of a complex issue.
Absolutely. But like the study highlights, they're often feeling overwhelmed and ill-equipped to actually handle these situations.
They're doing their best, but they need more support.
So what are the major roadblocks they're facing?
Well, the study revealed several recurring themes.
Like what were the big ones?
A lack of training was huge.
Not surprising.
Overwhelming workloads.
I can only imagine.
Insufficient support from administration.
That's got to be frustrating.
Issues with guidance counseling.
Which makes accessing help even harder.
And even parental denial about the severity of their children's problems.
Oh, wow. So it's coming from all sides.
It really is a perfect storm of challenges.
And what's so interesting is that, those obstacles aren't unique to Kenya.
Unfortunately not.
Several of the other articles you gave me, especially this one from the APA, show that teachers around the world are facing very similar barriers.
It really is a global issue.
It highlights the need for a more systemic approach to supporting both teachers and students.
We need to address the root causes, not just the symptoms.
Okay, so we've established that it's a big, complex issue, and teachers need more support.
That's a good starting point.
But what does that support actually look like?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
What are the solutions?
Let's shift gears a bit and explore some potential answers.
Okay, I'm ready.
One promising avenue that emerges from the sources, especially the NAMI reports, is this idea of robust school-based mental health services.
Okay, so having trained professionals like psychologists, counselors, social workers right there in the school building.
Exactly, making help readily available.
What are the advantages of that approach?
Well, I think it comes down to accessibility and early intervention.
Okay, I like that.
Imagine a scenario where every school had a dedicated team of mental health professionals
Okay, I'm picturing it.
who could provide counseling assessments, support groups.
All in one place.
Yeah, students wouldn't have to navigate complex referral processes or wait months for appointments.
And that would be huge, especially for students who might be struggling silently or whose families, lack the resources to seek help outside of school.
It removes so many barriers.
Early identification and intervention could be game changers.
They absolutely could if we can catch these issues early on and provide support before they escalate.
Right before things reach a crisis point.
Exactly. We can make a real difference in the lives of young people.
And the CDC's action guide actually lays out a roadmap for implementing these types of services effectively.
There are models out there that work.
So it's not just a pipe dream. It's doable.
It is if we make it a priority.
I like that positive note to end on for now.
We'll delve deeper into solutions next time.
Can't wait.
But it's not just about bringing in professionals,
I was just thinking that.
There's this growing recognition that everyone has a role to play in creating a supportive school environment.
Okay, yeah. I'm curious to unpack that.
It takes a village, right?
For sure. We've talked about the big picture, but what can individual stakeholders,
Yeah, like on a practical level.
right, like teachers, parents, even the students themselves, what can they actually do?
It's about empowering everyone.
Okay, so let's start with teachers.
They're in a unique position,
Yeah, they're the ones interacting with these kids every day.
Exactly. They can observe students' behavior and spot those potential warning signs.
That makes sense. But so many of the teachers in the Kenyan study talked about feeling totally unprepared to deal with these issues,
Oh, absolutely. And that's why professional development is so crucial.
like giving them the tools.
Exactly. Teachers need training on how to recognize those signs of distress,
Hmm.
how to create a classroom environment that feels safe and supportive.
That sense of belonging can make a huge difference.
It really can, and how to connect students with the appropriate resources.
So it's not about turning teachers into therapists.
Right. They're not expected to have all the answers.
It's about giving them the tools to be more effective first responders.
Exactly. And that ties in with something else that came up in the CDC Action Guide.
Oh, what's that?
The importance of fostering positive relationships between teachers and students.
Makes sense. When kids feel connected to a caring adult at school,
It can have a huge impact on their overall well-being.
it's that sense of safety and support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, what about parents?
Yeah. Where do they fit into all of this?
Parents are absolutely vital, I think.
I mean, they know their kids best, right?
They do. They're the experts on their own children.
And they play a huge role in creating a stable home environment.
And fostering open communication.
That's so important.
The sources really emphasize that early intervention is key.
Catching things early.
Yeah. And parents are often the first to notice when something is off.
Okay, so what can parents do if they suspect their child might be struggling?
The most important thing, I think, is to create a safe space for their child to talk.
And just listen without judgment.
Exactly. Let them know they're not alone. It's also crucial to seek professional help early on.
Instead of waiting for things to get really bad.
Exactly. And advocating for their child's needs within the school system.
Making sure their voice is heard.
That can make a real difference.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little push to get the ball rolling.
It often does. And speaking of students,
Oh, yeah. I wanted to circle back to that.
there was this fascinating thread in some of the sources about the power of peer support.
I was really interested in that part.
It's incredible how much influence young people have on each other.
I mean, we forget that sometimes as adults.
We do. We often think of adults as the primary support system.
Yeah, like we have all the answers.
But in reality, kids are much more likely to confide in their friends.
That makes sense. They speak the same language.
Exactly.
Oh.
So the question is, how do we harness that power in a positive way?
Turn it into a force for good.
Peer support programs are a great example.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Some of the sources highlighted programs where students are actually trained
Trained to do what?
to recognize signs of distress in their classmates,
Wow.
to offer support, and to encourage them to seek help from trusted adults.
So it's like creating a network of support within the student body itself.
Exactly, extending the reach of mental health services in a really organic way.
I love that.
And these programs can be incredibly effective.
How so?
Not only do they provide direct support to students who are struggling,
Right, that immediate peer connection.
but they also help to reduce stigma and create a more open and accepting school culture
Mental health becomes something you can talk about.
instead of hiding it.
That's powerful.
Mm.
Okay, so we've talked about the roles of teachers, parents,
You have a
students.
whole community approach.
But if we zoom out a bit, it seems like creating a truly supportive environment for mental health in schools requires a fundamental shift in perspective.
I couldn't agree more.
Like, what do you mean by that?
There's this tendency to view mental health as something separate from education.
Like an add-on or an afterthought?
Exactly. But the reality is, mental health is intricately connected to a student's ability to learn and thrive in school.
It's all connected.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
like trying to build a house with a shaky foundation.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You can keep patching up the cracks.
Right, putting Band-Aids on the problem.
But until you address the underlying structural issues, the house will never be truly stable.
We need to get to the root of it,
Exactly. We need to move away from this reactive approach.
where we're only addressing mental health issues when they become a crisis.
Right. We need to be proactive instead.
Building that strong foundation.
Create a system where mental well-being is woven into the fabric of the school day.
I love that. So if we could wave a magic wand and make one big change.
Oh, if only it were that easy.
I know, but if we could, what would it be? What would improve mental health support in schools the most?
You know, for me, it all comes down to awareness and understanding.
Okay, unpack that for me.
I'd want every single person involved in education,
Teachers, administrators, policymakers, parents.
everyone to truly grasp the profound impact of mental health on a child's overall well-being and their ability to learn.
Seeing it as a fundamental part of the equation.
Absolutely. It's about seeing mental health not as something separate or stigmatized,
Not something to be ashamed of.
but as an integral part of a child's development.
We need a complete reframing.
I think so.
Yeah.
If we could shift the mindset from fixing what's broken to nurturing what's possible,
I love that.
we'd see a ripple effect of positive change.
Instead of waiting for students to reach a crisis point.
We're proactively building their resilience.
Their coping skills, their emotional intelligence.
Exactly. It's about creating a school environment where mental well-being is valued as highly as academic achievement.
They're two sides of the same coin.
They really are. Now you've got me thinking.
Oh, good. I like it when that happens.
We focus a lot on the challenges.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But what are some real-world examples of schools getting it right?
Let's highlight some success stories.
You actually gave me some great examples of programs that are doing just that.
Yeah, the ones I sent over.
Mind Your Peace Sources of Strength and Project Happiness.
Yeah, what makes them so effective?
They all stand out as models of what's possible when we really invest in mental health support in schools.
What are they doing differently?
Well, each one takes a slightly different approach.
Okay, so tell me about Mind P.
They focus on integrating mindfulness practices into the curriculum itself.
I love that idea.
It's about equipping students with tools to manage their emotions and improve their focus right from a young age.
Making it part of their everyday learning.
Exactly. And it's been shown to have a real impact.
Like, what kind of impact are we talking about?
Students who participate in Mind P show improvements in things like attention span, emotional regulation, even empathy.
So it's not just about, addressing problems after they arise.
Right.
It's about building those foundational skills that contribute to well-being from the start.
Building those inner resources.
Okay, that makes sense. What about sources of strength?
That one really intrigued me too.
Yeah, that one stood out to me as well.
Sources of Strength leverages the power of peer networks.
Okay, so kind of tapping into that natural tendency for kids to confide in their friends.
Exactly. They train student leaders to recognize signs of distress in their classmates, offer support, and connect them with resources.
So it's like an extra layer of support within the school.
It really is,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly effective. We know that teenagers especially are often more comfortable talking to their peers than to adults.
That makes sense. They're going through similar things.
Right, so Sources of Strength essentially creates this network of support within the student body itself.
Extending the reach of those mental health services in a more organic way.
Exactly.
I can see how that would help to reduce stigma, too.
Absolutely. Mental health becomes something that's talked about openly among friends.
Instead of being something to be ashamed of.
Right. It becomes normalized.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
And what about Project Happiness?
Now, that one comes at it from a more positive psychology angle.
Okay, interesting.
They focus on teaching kids about gratitude, resilience, and the science of happiness.
It's like flipping the script, right?
It is. Instead of just focusing on what's wrong, it's about equipping kids with the tools to build a sense of well-being from the inside out.
I like that a lot. And does it work?
The research says yes.
Like, what have they found?
Students involved in Project Happiness show increased levels of optimism, self-esteem, life satisfaction.
That's amazing.
They're better able to bounce back from setbacks and navigate challenges.
They're resilient.
Exactly. Okay, so we have these fantastic examples of programs that are actually working.
Right, they're out there.
But the question is, how do we scale this up?
Yeah, how do we make these kinds of initiatives accessible to all students?
Not just those in a handful of schools.
Right, because that's the problem right now.
That's the million-dollar question, and it's going to take a multifaceted approach.
Like, what needs to happen?
We need policymakers, school administrators, teachers, parents.
Even the students themselves.
Everyone working together.
It really does take a village.
It does. But we also need to be realistic.
Okay, meaning?
Implementing these kinds of changes takes time, resources, and a sustained commitment.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Like a long game.
Okay, so let's talk about those specifics.
Mm-hmm.
What are some concrete steps we can take to move in the right direction?
Well, first and foremost, we need to prioritize funding for mental health services in schools.
Makes sense.
That means advocating for increased budgets at the local, state, and national levels.
Putting our money where our mouths are.
Exactly. It means exploring creative funding models and partnerships, and it means making sure that mental health is given equal weight to other educational priorities.
It can't just be an afterthought.
No, it needs to be front and center.
But funding alone isn't enough.
It's just the first step.
What else do we need?
We also need to invest in training for educators.
Giving them the tools they need.
Exactly. Teachers need the skills and knowledge to recognize warning signs, create supportive classroom environments, and connect students with appropriate resources.
And it can't just be a one-off workshop or something.
It has to be ongoing.
Embedded in their professional development.
I agree. We need to see a shift in how we prepare future teachers as well.
Starting from the ground up.
Exactly. Mental health needs to be a core component of teacher training programs, not just an elective or an afterthought.
It needs to become part of the DNA of the teaching profession.
I think so. And what about parents? How can we better engage them in this process?
Yeah, there's such a crucial part of the equation.
Parents are such valuable partners in supporting their children's mental health.
So how do we get them more involved?
We need to make sure they have access to resources and information.
Like, what kind of resources are we talking about?
Information about common mental health challenges. Tips for talking to their kids about mental health.
So practical advice.
Exactly. And we need to foster open communication between home and school.
Two-way street.
And create opportunities for parents to advocate for their children's needs within the school system.
Giving them a voice at the table.
It's about building those bridges between home and school, recognizing that mental health is a shared responsibility.
We're all in this together.
And finally, we can't forget about the voices of students themselves.
They need to be heard.
They do. They're the ones experiencing these challenges firsthand. Their insights, their needs, their ideas should be at the center of all our efforts.
It's about empowering them to be active participants in shaping the solutions, not just passive recipients of services.
I think you've really hit on something important. We need to move away from this top-down approach and create a system that's truly responsive to the needs of students.
More flexible and adaptable.
Exactly. A system that's flexible, innovative, and constantly evolving.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. It's clear that mental health in schools is a complex issue.
With no easy answers.
But it's also an issue that's gaining much-needed attention. And with that attention comes a real opportunity for positive change.
I agree. I'm optimistic. There's a growing awareness of the importance of mental health, and we're seeing a real shift in attitudes and approaches.
People are starting to wake up to this.
They are. The programs we discussed today are just a few examples of the incredible work that's being done.
So for anyone listening who wants to get involved, where can they start? What can they do to make a difference?
There are so many ways to contribute.
Give us some ideas.
Start by having open conversations about mental health.
With your own children.
With your friends, with your family.
Have people talking.
Exactly. Educate yourself about the resources available in your community.
There's more out there than You might think.
Support local organizations that are working to improve mental health support in schools, advocate for policy changes that prioritize mental well-being.
So many ways to make an impact.
There are every action, no matter how small, can make a difference.
It's about planting those seeds of change.
And watching them grow.
I love that image. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of mental health in schools.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and inspiring. And we encourage you to continue exploring this important topic and to find ways to make a difference in your own community.